All right, so this is the review for week number 3. We're going to, in our new weekly lessons this week, be solving systems of equation by substitution. And one of the things that we are going to need to do is to be able to solve an equation for a variable. And so that's the skill we are going to practice in our weekly review. So we've done this last semester, we've done it a lot, but it's always good to make sure that it's fresh in our memory. So the first thing that we want to be able to do is we want to make sure that when we're looking at a problem, that we are solving for the variable that has a coefficient of 1. That's going to be our best choice. So if I look here, my variable here is x and it has a coefficient of 2, but my variable here is y and it has a coefficient of 1. So that tells me for this particular problem, the best variable to solve for is the coefficient of 1. And so remember that when we are solving for any variable, what we work with are our inverse operations. And so if I see this positive 2x, I'm going to subtract 2x so that on the left side of the equation, the y only is remaining. And then I'm going to drop down my equal sign, and I'm going to have negative 2x plus 5. Okay. If we look at our second example, and we look at the coefficients, we have a variable x, and the coefficient there is a 1. And we have a variable y, and the coefficient there is a negative 3. So for this particular problem, the best variable to solve for is the coefficient of 1, which happens to be the x. And so that's how I identify which variable that I'm going to solve for. And so for this particular problem, all we're doing is we're keeping that equal sign where it is, and we want the x to be on this side by itself. And so you can either write out the step like I did in the first equation, or a lot of us now look at this and say, well, if this is negative 3y, if it moves to the other side, it becomes a positive 3y. And the positive 7 just drops down and remains a positive 7. And so we have x equals 3y plus 7. Now, if we look at example 3, we have 3x minus y equals 12. And if we go to look at our variables here, our coefficients are a 3 and a negative 1. And so we do not have a coefficient of 1 in this particular problem. When we don't have a coefficient of 1, the next best option is a coefficient of negative 1. And so therefore, in this problem, the best variable to select to solve for is going to be the y. And so now I'm going to take, and I'm going to have to drop down the y, knowing that the coefficient's a negative 1, and so that would be a negative sign, or you can actually write the negative 1 in there if that's helpful to you, equals, when this 3x moves over to the other side of the equation, it's going to become a negative 3x. When this 12 drops down, it's going to remain a positive 12. Now I'm not finished yet, because what I have here is a negative 1y, and I want it to be y equals. And so I'm going to have to take and divide everything by negative 1. And so that's going to leave me with y equals 3x minus 12. So although we've done this before, we've always been told which variable to solve for. Today, as we go into this week's lessons, one of the big things you're going to be focusing on is being able to determine which is the best variable to solve for. So keep in mind that what we are looking for when we're doing that should always be a coefficient of 1, and then the next best choice would be a coefficient of -1. And you'll talk more about that in this week's videos.